Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muliwanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and please give us a 5-star review wherever you can. Our guest today is Ryan Hogan. He is here to celebrate his debut picture book. It's called Why Should I Climb This Tree? Before we invite Ryan into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Dino Pajama Party, the delightful picture book by Laurie Walmark. Much like us, dinosaurs love to have fun. In Dino Pajama Party, dinosaurs from all around gather together to play instruments, dance, and sing before bedtime. But soon, like children, dinosaurs grow tired and need their rest. This rhyming picture book is sure to have kids following the dino's lead and be ready to go to sleep. The short, bouncy rhymes make each reading a celebration for dancers and dino lovers alike. This book is a welcome alternative to the umpteenth reading of familiar dino titles. This bedtime, nap time, fun time, anytime picture book is destined to be a new favorite, and it belongs on your family library shelves. Get your copy today, Dino Pajama Party by Laurie Walmark. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Lucas and the Game of Chance, an exciting middle grade novel written by Anthony Almana and illustrated by Donald Babbage. Lucas and the Game of Chance is enthralling enough to read in one afternoon. The characters are fun, the setting is vivid, and the adventure the characters embark on is full of surprises and action. Lucas in the Game of Chance follows the adventures of a hero who's desperate to regain everything he's lost. He meets a magic snake who dances to his tunes and leaves gold coins in return. When Lucas gives in to a moment of pride and gambles everything he loves away to a jealous merchant, he's forced on a desperate and treacherous quest to find destiny, sun, and moon, and beg for redemption. You and your kids are going to love this book. It's Lucas and the Game of Chance by Anthony Almana. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. Join us right now from right outside of beautiful Saratoga Springs and the state of New York, a beautiful part of the world. Our guest today is here to celebrate his beautiful picture book. It's called Why Should I Climb This Tree? Please welcome to the show, Ryan Hogan. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I can't wait for you to tell us all about Why Should I Climb This Tree?
I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here. This is a really exciting book, and it's been a great journey for me to take it through the process. So yeah. I'm very excited.
So why should we read Why Should I Climb This Tree?
Well, man, there's a lot of reasons. You know, I think the genesis of this book was really about kids and getting them back outside. And it's interesting because when I first wrote the story, it was back in 2015. And as time evolved, it kind of just sat on the shelf and collected dust. And then the pandemic happened, and it just became so relevant in my mind, you know, as raising my own children and seeing everyone just kind of shut inside. And I thought, you know what? This needs to be taken off the shelf, and it needs to be worked on and spread around and shared with the world. And I think that folks can get a lot of messages out of this book. You know, one of the things I really like about it is how versatile it is. Mm-hmm. You know, it has a lot of messages and has some primary core anchor messages, but you could really apply this to a lot of different things.
So who are we going to meet, and why should I climb this tree?
So you are going to meet my son. So this is a gift for my son, Jack, who's now 14. And he's a young boy at the time. And you're going to meet our rescue pup, Lightning, who's our spotted terrier throughout the book. And you'll meet me.
Excellent.
And I'll be in there as well. Yeah.
Excellent. And so you were saying that there are a number of different core messages. What's the message that's going to jump right out at us?
So the climbing tree is really a metaphor for life at the end of the day. So I really think what's going to jump out the most is the boy who's not quite sure what he can gain from this adventure and from this challenge. And as he's climbing the tree, he sees different creatures, he encounters different challenges, and he perseveres and he doesn't give up. And the reward is really to get to the top. And that perspective that he gains from the top of the tree and looking out upon his world and looking down and thinking to himself, I made it up on my own, and I overcame these challenges. I really think it gives kids a lot of confidence and a lot of hope that throughout their life, they're going to be able to achieve what they want if they stick to it and they don't give up.
Now, I'm imagining that at 9 or however your son was when you were first inspired by this book, there was a moment where you encouraged him to climb a tree. And I know it wasn't too long ago, my niece, who was 13 or 14 at the time, we were out on a hike, and she said, "Can I climb that tree?" And I'm definitely not a fan of heights, and I said, "Well, you'll be doing it on your own." But I encouraged her, and I was really happy to see her. But at the same time, I was terrified that she could slip and fall out of that tree. Was that something that you were kind of struggling with?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because it did indeed come from a very specific moment in my old house. It was in the middle of this forest in Malta. It's called Luther Forest. And there were trees everywhere. And we had this really beautiful tree in the front yard. And my daughter and my son were playing outside, and I said, you guys should climb that tree. And they looked at me like, well, why? Why should we climb this tree, right? And growing up, I climbed trees all the time. So I grew up on a lot of different, a lot of land and a lot of different landscapes, meadows, forests, swampy areas. And I literally used to climb trees and sit up there for hours. And, I say this a lot in a lot of my commentary on my website, but I think it's a lost art. And when I was thinking about this book and how I could reach an audience and kind of impact children and families, I did want to choose something that was quite provocative, and that was something that maybe, instead of, hey, go ride your bike or, go play hopscotch, this is something that I think is not as popular anymore, but certainly very rewarding and kind of neat, kind of interesting and unique. Mm-hmm. And I don't see a lot of kids climbing trees anymore. I used to love it. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of my goal.
Yeah. Well, of course, we didn't have iPhones and laptops and DVDs and streaming services, so that's why we were climbing trees.
100%.
But you're right. It is, and my aversion to heights it's a lot worse now than it was when I was a kid. And I would climb trees. And it was an amazing thing because you did encounter, first off, what most people don't understand is that there's like a thriving community that lives in the canopy over our heads.
Yes.
In most neighborhoods. We don't pay attention to it, but there are birds and insects and creatures that we never see come down on the ground, but they're just up. It's like I was at a doctor's office, and it looked out over this one part of Boston called the Emerald Necklace, and it's just a swath of green that kind of encircles the city. And I could look down and look at the canopy, and it was like a super highway for birds. There was just so much traffic going back and forth that I just never was aware of.
It's true. There's this whole world, and that I really wanted to portray that alongside my unbelievably talented illustrator, Susanna Bramer. We wanted to portray that world that you speak of, and we wanted to put a little spin on it. And so, you'll see in the book that there are these creatures who are hybrid creatures that really, again, portray and signify the unpredictability of life. Mm-hmm. And you may encounter something that you've never seen before, but it could be amazing, mm-hmm. could be very interesting, and to not be afraid of it, right? But I'll tell you, when I was a kid and I would climb the tree, I felt so connected to the tree and therefore nature in doing that activity. And there was this very large tree in my front yard that was a popular one that I used to frequent. And it had a beautiful view of my home and the roof, and it was quite tall. And so it really gave me that perspective, like whatever the case may be, fighting with my brother or having to do chores that I didn't want to do, or, say I got a bad grade in school or something, that would give me a chance to just have peace and go up and just look down and just think about everything that was going on in my life. And it centered me. And I really just wanted that not only for my own kids, but maybe, we can bring that back a little bit. And it's funny you mentioned the screens and the iPhones too, because I think with everyone really being inside for the pandemic and kind of choosing to just hunker down, we might have gotten stuck a little bit in the mud, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe turning to the screens is too much of a habit now. Maybe mm-hmm. we should break that habit. And I really wanted folks to read this and then feel like, hey, let's go outside for an hour, mm-hmm. even if it's just an hour. Mm-hmm. Let's go outside as a family and go for a walk. Yep. Let's go for a bike ride or a hike.
Yeah, so important. It's really interesting that you discovered how important it was to center yourself, to go to a quiet place when you're frustrated, when you're angry, instead of blowing up. Or maybe you went to the quiet place after you blew up. I don't know. That's not important. The statute of limitations has run out. But yeah. I mean, you understood that at a young age, and so I'm imagining that's since you're writing about it, that's carried forth in your life. I'm guessing you're not climbing up trees when you get frustrated at somebody in your family. But how are you centering yourself today as a parent, as somebody who's dealing with the challenges of the pandemic in everyday life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're all trying to do our best. And as much as this is a children's book, I hope that it does resonate with parents and adults too. Those learnings from when I was a kid have carried through to now. And, I work a job that's high stress, and it's very rewarding, but it's high stress. And, I can't tell you how easy it is to reset by spending 20 minutes outside. Mm-hmm. And I was reading some studies that they've done on the effects of the outdoors and nature on the brain. And it's just dozens and dozens of proven benefits. Even sound mm-hmm. of nature is restorative. Mm-hmm. They did one study where they had kids listen to chirping crickets and outside noises like ocean waves. And simply 15, 20 minutes of that allowed them to just recenter and focus on whatever it is they had to get done. Mm-hmm. And so I try to do that in my daily and in my weekly. Another thing we like to do as a family is we go up to the Adirondacks. I'm sure you're familiar with the Adirondack Park. And it's just unbelievable up there. It's so gorgeous. And we go hiking and canoeing, and we spend a lot of time up there. Mm-hmm. And so that's a short drive away. So I just think it's so important to try to implement outside time during the day. Instead of maybe say you get a 30-minute break from work, take a walk. Mm-hmm. Instead of scrolling on the phone, maybe go outside and do something outside for a little while. And it it's so beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. The Adirondacks and Adirondack Park is a beautiful part of the world. I spent 18 hours lost on one of the mountains there when I was a youngin', about 11, 12 years old. So I remember the Adirondacks very well. It was an adventure.
It's funny, my father, when my brother and I were children, my father, so there's a club called the 46er Club. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there are peaks that are over 4,000 feet. And part of our upbringing was to complete these 46 peaks. And I believe we started when I was about 6 and my brother was about 8. And we did a few every year. And my father planned it so when we were headed off to college, we were going to complete our last high peak and join into this club. And you made me laugh when you said getting lost because back then you didn't have an iPhone or a GPS or an app to help you get to the top. And some of them were trailless. Mm-hmm. And they call them herd paths so that you could sort of follow where, people were walking. But there was one particular mountain that we were using a map and compass to get to the top, and we got lost for quite some time. Mm. And we were just walking through thick, dense forest. And as scary as it was also exhilarating, mm-hmm. And that kind of excitement, I think it would be good for people, not to get lost, of course, but just to feel that high, that rush from the greenery.
Yeah, it is. I look back on that and I laugh. I know that there were moments that I was afraid, but I was never terrified. It was always like, I'm going to find my way back at some point, someone will find me. Right. So, I didn't suffer any lasting effects from it other than the fact that I got a great story out of it. And I've been able to share it over the years. But I love this idea of just encouraging families to spend more time outside and spend more time outside together. I think that's a super important.
I do too. And so, raising kids, it's been imperative that we spend time outside, and we encourage it here at the house. And it was funny the other day, I was thinking about stopping the podcast. The kids, have their time that they go on YouTube or TikTok or, they have their computer time. My son right now is learning how to animate. He's learning coding. And those are things I absolutely would encourage him to do. But you notice in his own work happening. No one's connected. And the other day, it was actually Sunday evening. I said, let's go outside and take a family bike ride. And everyone just came alive outside. And when we were biking around the neighborhood, everyone was talking, they were chatting, they were catching up, they were connecting. And it was like night and day, from inside the house to what we were doing on the devices and the computers to outside when we're actually connecting as a family. Mm-hmm. And that's just a small example of, say a 30 or 40 minute bike ride. Mm-hmm. But, when you're out there, say camping or, spending a long time hiking a high peak or wherever it may be, that's a chance for you to just absolutely become a family again. Yeah. And I just think that's so important right now, more than ever.
Yeah. So many, we talk about how empowering it is for us when we're sitting down and reading a book like Why Should I Climb This Tree, when we're asking our kids questions and we're listening to them and we're letting our kids know that we're interested in them and we're interested in how they think and what they're thinking. To take that a step further and to go on a hike and to say to your 7 or 8-year-old, okay, it's your turn to lead. You take us up this trail. You bring us to the top of this mountain. And, of course, you want to do that safe and do it in a way that the child can be successful. But to just allow, find ways in nature for children to go out there, kids to go out there and to take the lead and for us to follow them, I think can be incredibly empowering.
I couldn't agree more with you. And in fact, you know, if you think about a trail, say 50 feet on any given trail, wherever you are, or even in a park, it doesn't have to be in a mountain. But to your example, think of all the topics of conversation that can come up in that 50 feet of trail. You know, whether it's like, hey, you want to take the lead, you know, you'd be a great leader. You know, I can see that you're navigating those rocks in that stream quite well. That's a conversation starter with your kid. You know, or they see, say, a toad hopping on the side of the trail and they want to go look at it. There's a topic of conversation, and everything just leads to the next thing. And those interactions are priceless. I mean, when I think back to being outside with my brother and my mother and father, I remember the conversations we had. I remember the connections that we made on those trips. And those are memories that I'm going to hold with me forever. You know, and I think it's just really hard to make a memory when your son or daughter's in the other room on their phone, or you're on your phone, right? And it's just like, where's the interaction there? And, you know, I think that that's unfortunately maybe a necessary part of life now, but I think also it could be balanced better. And that's precisely why I'm really excited about this book, because I think it just plants that seed to, you know what, go outside and climb a tree, or go outside and go do something. And you might discover, you know, who you are. You might discover something that you absolutely love that you didn't know before.
Well, I know there's at least one parent out there listening who's like, yeah, Ryan, nature, yes, I would love nature, and we want to get our kids out there, and I love that they're in nature, and I want to spend time with them. But, man, I don't want my kid to get hurt. I can't bear the thought that the kid might get a bruise or a broken arm, and my goodness, and you're letting the kid climb a tree. What would you say to that parent?
You know, I would say certainly safety first. But I'll tell you, every scratch and bruise that I got outside, roughhousing outside, or every pricker bush that scraped me as I was trudging through the woods, it made me stronger. You know, I learned from that. You know, and I think there's something to be said about sometimes letting kids fall. You know, if we're too protective and we shelter them too much and they're not going outside and, you know, maybe getting a scrape or a bump, I think that we're maybe keeping them from something important that they need to learn. You know, back in the day, you know, it was the 80s when I was a kid, and it was an all-day affair. It was out in the woods exploring for hours, you know, and then our beacon to come home was dusk. Right.
When the streetlights came on.
When the streetlights came on, or when you saw the sun getting down and you're like, okay, I think I smell dinner, you know, and you would run back home, and there wasn't a lot of worry there. It was like, you know, maybe my parents gave me more freedom than others, but I have a feeling that people could probably admit that times have changed a little, where we're a little bit too worried about our kids being out there, but maybe we should give them that independence so they can learn about themselves.
Absolutely. It's so important for our kids to learn that to learn to bounce back, to get up and to dust themselves off, and remember those scar stories that you were referring to. You know, all those little bumps and bruises and scrapes, they become a scar, and they become a story that we can share with our kids when we become parents.
I remember when there was a certain patch we had this apple orchard behind our home. It wasn't ours, but back then everyone really didn't care where you walked or what you did. We were all friends. And I remember there was a huge pricker bush patch that you had to get through to get to this amazing meadow that had these beautiful views in this hill and these trees. And it was just a really pretty spot. But there was no way around the pricker bushes. So you had to go through them. So you were inevitably going to get caught a couple times to get to this beautiful place. And I think that's pretty symbolic too. I mean, I don't think anything in life comes easy that's worth it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like Why Should I Climb This Tree is a book that a family can enjoy over and over again, and just start conversations and hopefully inspire them to get out and climb trees and enjoy nature together. Ryan, where can people go to find out more about Why Should I Climb This Tree and find out more about you?
Sure. So I have a website that's pretty fun. It's just whyshouldiclimbthistree.com. And it talks about where you can buy the book. We're in a couple local places here, some bookstores, but we're also on Amazon. And you can order it through the publisher, Troy Bookmakers. And there's a little bit of media on there too. So I do play music, and I'm trying to put some instrumental music to the scenes in the book. So I hope to continue to add those for people to listen to and enjoy. And then there's a brief bio about myself and the illustrator. And so that's really the best place. And, I would just hope that, if people felt inspired by this book, that they would spread the word, because I think this is something that could do us a lot of good. I think fresh air is well needed.
Amen.
Right
Amen.
now.
Yep. Amen. Hey, before I go, how does your son feel about being the star of your book?
He was really excited about it. So you'll see in the book, there's a picture of him in the beginning, and he's about 4, I think, in that picture. And he was just funny throughout the process, because I did have to ask him to model for the illustrator in certain poses. And, being a teenager, he kind of hesitated to do those things, but he was a great sport. And I think he's really excited to have the book as a gift to him.
Awesome. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author of Why Should I Climb This Tree, Ryan Hogan. Hey, Ryan, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading With Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Kimber Fox Morgan. She'll be here to celebrate Embarrassing George. Great picture book. You're going to love meeting Kimber. Hey, if you are going to be in Costa Mesa, California on October 2nd, be sure to make your way over to the Orange County Children's Book Festival. We'll be there. We'll be performing our interactive magic show. We'll have a great Reading With Your Kids booth. You get to meet me. You get to meet some of the great books that we feature here on the podcast. You also may be invited to be a guest on a future episode of the show. We're going to be interviewing families and authors and illustrators out at the fair. Maybe you and your family will be one. It's the Orange County Children's Book Festival, the largest children's book festival in North America. It's happening October 2nd. We'll be there. We hope you will be there too. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Ryan Hogan. Please be sure to check out Why Should I Climb This Tree? Also want to thank our sponsors, Lori Walmart, Dino Pajama Party. Talk about a fun picture book for your young one. And Anthony L. Manor, Lucas and the Game of Chance. A fantastic middle grade novel, a certified great read. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.